One day, after a particularly heated argument that had ended with Rosa storming out of the kitchen, Mel found her sitting on the back steps, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "This is too hard," she said, her voice quiet. "I'm not good enough." Mel sat down next to her, a rare, unfamiliar silence settling between them. "You think I was born knowing how to make chili," he said, his voice a low grumble. "I burned more pots of chili than you've had hot dinners. The secret ain't being good. The secret is not quitting when you're not." He looked out at the city skyline at the glittering tower that had replaced his diner. "This business, it's tough." He continued more to himself than to her. "It'll chew you up and spit you out. But if you love it, if you really love it, there's nothing else like it." Rosa looked at the old man, at his bald head and his grumpy face, and for the first time, she didn't see a teacher. She saw a kindred spirit. "Okay, chef," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "Let's go make some chili." Mel just grunted, but as they walked back into the kitchen, he knew he had found something he hadn't even realized he was looking for. He had found his next chapter. He was no longer just the chili king. He was a mentor, a teacher, a grumpy, unlikely source of hope. He had, against all odds, become a philanthropist, and the world was a slightly spicier and infinitely better place for it. Part 9, the main course, Chapter 27, An Independent Voice. The meeting with Schuyler Frost producers took place in a glass-walled conference room overlooking Nashville. It was the kind of place where dreams were either made or mercilessly crushed. The producers, a pair of sharp-suited men who looked like they'd been assembled from a catalog of modern anxieties, laid out their vision for Left Foot Layup. They talked about target demographics, streaming algorithms, and brand synergy. They never once mentioned the song's heart. Alice listened politely, her hands clasped calmly in her lap. Tommy sat beside her, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. When they had finished their presentation, a hopeful silence filled the room. "No," Alice said. It was a quiet word, but it landed with the force of a slammed door. The producers blinked. "No. It's a beautiful song, as it is," she explained, her voice even. "And I'm honored that an artist of Schuyler's caliber wants to record it. But I'm not changing the lyrics. The song is not about winning. It's about trying and failing and being okay with it. It's about knowing which foot is your right foot, even when you accidentally use the left. If you take that away, it's not my song anymore." The meeting ended quickly after that. As they walked out into the Tennessee sunshine, Tommy turned to her, a mixture of frustration and awe on his face. "You just turned down a fortune, Mom." "I know," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face, "but I kept my song, and that's worth more." It was a turning point. They parted ways with the big label that had distributed Greasy Spoon. With the money they had earned, they started their own small independent label. They called it Right Foot Records. Their mission was simple to find and produce artists who had an authentic voice, who had stories to tell, regardless of whether they fit into a neat commercial box. Their first signing was a young, fiery bluegrass fiddler they had discovered at an open mic night. Their second was a 70-year-old bluesman who had been playing on street corners for 50 years. It was a risk, a gamble, on the idea that there were still people out there who wanted to hear real music made by real people. It was a lot like opening a diner in a town full of fancy restaurants. It was a crazy, beautiful left foot layup of an idea, and Alice had never felt more like herself. Chapter 28 Ampere's different kind of real Jolene sat on Travis Marsh's porch, a glass of sweet tea sweating in her hand, and listened as he offered her the world. A quiet life on his ranch, a partnership with a good and decent man who adored her. It was everything she was supposed to want. "Travis," she said, her voice soft, "you are one of the kindest men I have ever known, and I think in another life this would be the easiest yes of my life." He looked at her, his eyes full of a sad understanding. "But not in this life, huh?" "It's not you," she tried to explain the words, feeling clumsy and inadequate. "It's me. I spent so long trying to fit into a dream that someone else had for me. First it was being a basketball star. Then it was being a singer in your band, and now..." She trailed off, looking out at the rolling hills of his ranch. "This is a beautiful dream, Travis. It's just not my dream." Her dream, she had come to realize, was the noisy, chaotic, wonderful life she had built for herself. It was the smell of hairspray and gossip in her salon. It was the satisfaction of balancing her own books, of fixing a leaky faucet in her own apartment. It was the fierce, complicated love she felt for her found family scattered across the country, but connected by a bond forged in a greasy spoon. She thought of Mel. She didn't want to be with him. Their time had passed a brief, beautiful, and utterly unsustainable collision. But he had taught her something important. He had challenged her, pushed her, and in his own grumpy, roundabout way, he had shown her that she was stronger than she thought. Travis was offering her comfort, but Mel had offered her a fire. And she had learned that she didn't need anyone else to keep her warm. She could build her own fire. She drove away from the ranch that evening with a sense of clarity and a strange, exhilarating lightness. She was alone, but for the first time in her life, she was not lonely. She was the proprietor of the Sassy Teas, a successful businesswoman, a good friend, and a woman who was finally completely the author of her own story, and she couldn't wait to see what the next chapter would bring. Chapter 29, The Commissioner's Desk. The Walton case concluded not with a bang, but with a quiet, sad whimper. The DNA evidence was irrefutable. Mr. Walton, the quiet, henpecked man from Missis, Walton's stories had been a killer, and his wife had spent a lifetime protecting his secret, her abrasive personality, a carefully constructed fortress to keep the world at bay. The last time Elliot saw her, she was sitting in a sterile interview room, her flamingo pink hair, a defiant splash of color against the gray walls. He wasn't a monster, you know, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He just broke that one night, and I spent the next 50 years trying to put the pieces back together. The conversation stayed with Elliot. It was a stark reminder of how secrets could poison a life, how the things we don't say can be more destructive than the things we do. Their week in the desert cabin was a revelation. With no deadlines, no schedules, and no cell service, Elliot and Vera rediscovered the art of conversation. They talked about their dreams, their fears, their frustrations. Vera admitted that she felt like a fraud, sometimes a parenting expert whose own child had just tried to mail the cat to his grandmother. Elliot confessed that he was terrified of becoming commissioner of the political games and the public scrutiny of losing the part of the job he loved, being a cop. They returned to Phoenix with a new sense of purpose. They made a pact. Family first, always. Vera hired a manager to handle the business side of her writing career, freeing her up to focus on the parts she loved, the writing and the connection with her readers. She started a new book, a more personal, introspective work about the messy, beautiful, contradictory journey of a woman trying to balance a career, a family, and her own sanity. Elliot, when he was offered the position of police commissioner a few months later, accepted, but he did it on his own terms. He delegated, he streamlined, and he made a point of leaving his desk at 5 o'clock every night. He still went on patrol sometimes, a police commissioner in a squad car, just to remember what it was all about. Their life was still chaotic, but it was a chaos of their own, choosing a beautiful mess built on a foundation of love, respect, and a shared understanding that the most important appointments are the ones you have with each other. Chapter 30, The Phoenix Chili Cook-Off. The annual Phoenix Chili Cook-Off was a big deal, a citywide culinary battle for bragging rights and a giant chili pot-shaped trophy. Mel Sharples had always viewed it with contempt. Amateurs he'd snort, using canned beans and store-bought spice packets. It's an insult to the art form. But this year was different. This year, the greasy spoon was entering. His students, led by Rosa, had begged him to let them compete. After a week of relentless pestering, he had finally grudgingly agreed. The day of the cook-off was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Mel stood in the back of their booth, a thundercloud of anxiety, watching as Rosa and her team worked with a quiet professional focus that made his chest swell with a strange, unfamiliar pride. Rosa had taken his classic recipe and added her own signature twist, a hint of smoked paprika and a secret ingredient she refused to reveal even to him. He had tasted it the day before and had been forced to admit through gritted teeth that it was not terrible. Coming from Mel, this was the highest of praise. The competition was fierce. There were chefs from fancy restaurants, seasoned barbecue pit masters, and a terrifying squadron of grandmothers with cast iron pots and generations of chili-making secrets. As the judges made their final rounds, a hush fell over the crowd. They announced the third-place winner, then the second. Mel's heart was pounding in his ears. He hadn't felt this nervous since, well, ever. And the winner of this year's Phoenix Chili Cook-Off, the announcer boomed, is the new kid on the block, the Greasy Spoon. A wild cheer erupted from their booth. The students jumped up and down, hugging each other. Rosa, her face flushed with victory, was hoisted onto the shoulders of her teammates. She held the giant chili pot-shaped trophy aloft, a triumphant smile on her face. Mel just stood there, a slow, wide grin spreading across his face. He watched as Rosa was surrounded by reporters, her quiet confidence shining through as she answered their questions. "What's the secret ingredient?" one reporter asked. Rosa smiled. "A lot of hard work," she said, "and a really, really grumpy teacher." Later that evening, as they were cleaning up the booth, Rosa handed him a small steaming cup of the winning chili. "Okay, chef," she said, "the secret ingredient was a shot of strong black coffee. It deepens the flavor of the beef." Mel took a sip. It was perfect. It was his chili, but it was also something new, something more. It was the future. "Not bad, kid," he grumbled, handing the cup back to her. "For an amateur." She just laughed. He was the chili king, the philanthropist, the mentor. But in that moment, as he watched his protege bask in the glow of her first victory, Mel Sharples realized he had finally achieved the one thing he had never even known he wanted, a legacy that was even bigger than he was. Epilogue: the reunion. 10 years after the homecoming, the annual fundraiser for the Greasy Spoon was in full swing. The culinary school had become a Phoenix institution, a beacon of hope, and a place that served the best damn chili in the state. The event, held in the school's sprawling, beautifully renovated warehouse, was a testament to the family that had been born in a diner so many years ago. Alice Hyatt, her hair now streaked with a distinguished silver, sat on a stool on a small stage, her guitar in her lap. Right Foot Records had become a critical darling, a small but mighty force in the world of independent music. She didn't play big stadiums, but she sold out every theater she booked, her audience a devoted tribe who knew every word to every song. Jolene Hunnicutt, looking more fabulous than ever, was holding court by the silent auction table, laughing with a handsome, silver-haired architect who seemed to be utterly captivated by her. The Sassy Tees was now a chain with 3 locations in Nashville and a new franchise opening in Atlanta. She was a mogul, a mentor, and still the best friend a girl could ask for. Vera and Elliot Novak stood by the door, watching their now 15-year-old son, Melvin, try to convince one of the student chefs to give him the recipe for their award-winning spicy cornbread. Vera's third book, Empty Nest Full Fridge, was a bestseller, and she had found a comfortable balance between her public and private life. Elliot, now the respected and well-loved police commissioner, had more time for his family than ever before. He looked at Vera, at the love of his life, and knew with a certainty that had only deepened with time that he was the luckiest man in the world. And in the corner at a table laden with food sat Mel Sharples. He was officially retired now, having handed over the reins of both the culinary school and the chili empire to Rosa, who was now a celebrated chef and a formidable businesswoman in her own right. He was grumbling about the salt content of the macaroni and cheese, a familiar, comforting sound that was the unofficial soundtrack of the evening. Alice finished her song, a new one, a quiet, reflective ballad about the strange and beautiful ways that life comes full circle. The applause was warm and heartfelt. She looked out at the faces of her family, all of them older, wiser, and happier than they had ever been in that little diner. The building was gone, a memory paved over by progress. But the love, the spirit, the sheer stubborn, beautiful chaos of Mel's Diner was alive and well. It lived in a song, in a book, in a beauty salon, and in a pot of chili. The last slice had been served a long time ago, but the feast she knew would go on forever.